Hello, happy October evening, everyone. It's still quite nice this time of year, which is good. But I am at Carrow Road, wheeling away the rubbish. Hello. Wheeling away the rubbish could quite possibly be a sentiment that fits quite well for today. Norwich have lost 5-1 here to Aston Villa. I think they've been done, is another way of putting it. Bearing in mind this was the game where I was desperate for Norwich not to lose. I wasn't prepared to call it a must-win game or anything like that at this stage of the season, but you know, the Premier League dynamic means that there is increased pressure on certain games, and this felt like a game where if they could avoid losing, that would be really useful. I mean, and in the end they've been done. All ends up in all manner of ways, and we'll maybe get into the mitigations of all that in a tick, but Norwich never had any semblance of control in this match from the first minute. The first 10 minutes were open, both sides really went for it. Norwich had their moments, definitely, but Villa tended to always create them with more space, and ultimately, they have to be honest, they did look like scoring every time they got forward. Norwich had spells where they had more possession, but as I said, never really had any control of the game. Someone tweeted in reply to me saying that the biggest issue really was central midfield. Other than that, it was a pretty good, it was all right as a performance. I got to be honest, I don't agree with that. I thought Norwich was secondary in pretty much every department. Teemu Pukki was isolated. I thought some of the defending was awful, and when I say that, I don't necessarily mean just the back four and just say the second goal where Wesley is basically on his own 6 yards out with the centre-back behind him and one in front of him. I mean the recovery runs in all that. The fact that Villa had really clear plans, you could see it, of what they were doing in each situation. They had three in a line across Norwich's back line whenever there was a goal kick. I mean, Michael McGovern pulled off a brilliant double save for the penalty, but you could quite clearly see that Norwich just were so limited in terms of being able to build out from the back. Now, that I don't want to pin that on Michael McGovern either, because to be quite frank, all teams are going to look at how Norwich go about things, and Norwich have seemed to have lost this ability of playing it not only short but also just playing it mid-distance, just over the press. It seems quite easy for sides to map out how to stop Norwich's passing shapes, and again, like this, the secondary pass of say Amadou then to either Aarons or inside. Villa had players precisely where, and I could see it. It's like, Norwich normally have that passage where they then come inside, and Villa had someone there, and Norwich then really struggled to work their way around it. They did it once or twice, but as a general pattern to the game, it was a struggle. And I have to say, I watched how Villa, obviously I watched a lot of the game, but Villa seemed to know exactly what they were doing, and it seemed to be very easy for them to stop it, in that they seemed to have a real handle on how Norwich were going to go about things. So the other side of this international break, there are going to be a lot of questions for Norwich to answer, and one of those has to be how they now adapt, because Premier League teams, their analysts, their coaches, their management, they're very clever. It's not going to take them long to work things out and work out how to stop you. That's not a criticism of Norwich directly. That's just the level. Everything is at a higher level now for Norwich, and there has to be a level of adaptation from Norwich to counter this. Because, I mean, you can look at the stats today, and I think some of them are quite close, but let's not be around the bush. If you actually watch the game, in terms of the quality of chances and shots, I thought Villa outclassed Norwich in a lot of areas, to be honest. And if you feel that I'm being harsh, then say it. But that's kind of my view. In terms of the mitigation, I think we have to be honest that Norwich are obviously struggling with injuries, and I think Daniel Farke, now that there's a 2-week break and there's a chance that, say, Mario Vrancic, I hope, Tom Trybull, Alex Tettey will be back and around it. Because don't get me wrong, Norwich's defensive screen, you want to know the difference between this game and the Man City game, it's Alex Tettey probably, and I think that was clearly a major issue, and you could see Villa sort of pouring through that. Kenny McLean is not, he's a very good player, but he isn't going to be able to read a game, and Norwich didn't have anyone to break anything up, and I think that was also an issue at Palace, I have to say, last week. So, you know, there are players who may come back, and El Hernandez, who I do think has been a huge miss. He's close to being back in first team training now, and when he gets back up to speed, I think he'll be a real asset. But, you know, Norwich, it's hard looking at a performance like that and thinking, well, if you bring those players in, Norwich will be fine, because I don't think it's quite that straightforward. And again, that could just be the performance. It could be the effort that everyone has had to put in recent weeks, and really kind of pushing themselves to a point where they broke. And I think maybe today they just broke. They're all the questions we're now asking. We're not going to write them off, but they are questions they're going to have to answer. They're going to have to do it quite quickly, and it does put an extra emphasis, of course, on the trip to Bournemouth, which will be the other side of the international break. And Norwich need to make sure whoever does go away over the international break, they come back still in the same shape and condition as when they left, because Norwich are desperately having to wrap any sort of belief and momentum from last season. Sounds like a silly thing to say, but belief in what they're trying to do, they've got to really look after that, so that there are remnants of it when they come back to this place after the international break. So a really tough afternoon. Norwich did get their first goal in the final 15 minutes of a game, but off the back of my column I wrote for The Athletic in the week. I did fear when I was writing that column that goal might end up being some horrible consolation. So, you know, that's, maybe you can be damned by statistics, and maybe I've just been damned by a statistic, but the points are still there. Norwich have the questions to answer, and they'll need to do it pretty quickly. As I said, they go to Bournemouth the other side of the weekend. Loads of other points to cover off, but I would just say, I thought Todd Cantwell was very good today in relevance to everyone else, and, you know, in what he did. But, you know, other players were playing out of position. They clearly weren't fully fit, or they were just at a bridge too far. And I can understand Daniel Farke playing it pretty cool and pragmatically, and I think what has to happen is we have to see much better, regardless of who's on the pitch. Norwich have to do far better than that when they get back to action, because we don't just say it because it's a nice cliche. The Premier League is cruel, it is ruthless, and it will dispatch of Norwich in a heartbeat if they are not good enough, be it in terms of dealing with their injuries or actually their performances on the pitch. That's the reality of the situation. Finished it at 5-1. If you want to look up who scored and what have you, then you can do that any way you want to. And I'll be writing some fuller and deeper analysis, whatever my theme ends up being, over at The Athletic. It's quite a big week, or international break, lots of things going on, so keep an eye on what's on there over the course of the international break, because it's going to be a lot of fun one way or the other, as well as on my social media channels. Make sure wherever you're watching this, you give a like, a follow, subscribe, whatever the way is of doing it, so you can keep in touch with all that, because as I said, it's going to be fun, and it'll be a nice distraction, because the table's not going to change. Nothing's going to change between now and Bournemouth, so let's switch off, have some fun, and in the meantime we can know that Norwich have been done here by Aston Villa 5-1. Last season feels an awful long time ago already, doesn't it? See you soon.